My name is Lindsay Keith, and I am the organizer for today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us. I'm not sure if you noticed that we did, uh, I guess you could call it sell out, or we exceeded our limit on our first webinar. So it was a very great session earlier today. So we're super glad you guys are able to join us on the afternoon session. So before we dive into the webinar, I want to make sure to cover a few things and just kind of go through the agenda here, and then also just make sure um, I point out a few things on the GoToWebinar panel if you're not familiar. First, this webinar is being recorded, and so everyone attending will receive the recording. Everyone is in listen-only mode. So again, just make sure that you're able to hear us and everything is set up. If you have any questions, we do want you to enter those in the questions panel on the control panel that should be on the right-hand side of your screen, and just type those in, and we will get to that at the end of our session. We'll have a Q&A session there for you. So let me get started here. Thanks for joining us again today. When Champions Mind creator Jim Aframo asked his Twitter followers which mindset skill they'd like to learn more about, the number one answer was mental toughness. So that's the topic we're going to cover today. And with the future webinars on thriving under pressure, the psychology of injury, and more coming very soon. So if you are not following Jim on Twitter, please do so. He shares a lot of great information. So now I'm going to go ahead and pass this on over to Phil to get started with what you're here for.
Well, thank you, Lindsay, in advance to you, Jim, for your expertise, and then to everyone who's dialed in today. We appreciate you making time for us. And today, as Lindsay alluded to, Jim's going to share a lot of ins and outs of mental toughness. We're going to provide some real-world examples and also some handy takeaway tips that you can go away and start applying immediately. But first of all, Jim and I are going to cover what mental toughness is and indeed what it isn't. And Jim, we hear a lot about this or that player being mentally tough, or sometimes even a team acting mentally tough together. But there are so many different articles, podcasts, blog posts on the topic of mental toughness that it's kind of hard to pin down a definition. So how would you go ahead and define mental toughness?
Yeah, it's a great question, Phil, and thank you, and thanks, Lindsay, and really cool and awesome to be here with everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. I think this is going to be a lot of fun, so glad you're here with us. So mental toughness is the ability to remain positive and proactive in the most challenging of circumstances. And so a true test of mental toughness is not how well you perform on your best days, but how well you perform on your worst days. And champions always dig deep on their down days. And, you know, to champion ourselves, we want to do the same thing. And that is keep doing what we are supposed to be doing, you know, giving 100% of whatever percent we have that day to find a way to get the job done, regardless of the situation, in any mental or physical fatigue. And as you know, Phil, Jordan Dale, a star pitcher for the University of Oregon softball team, shared with us in an interview when we were talking with her about mental toughness. She said, mental toughness might not come naturally, but every athlete can develop it. And she talked about that she really needed to develop it to become the player that she is now today. And so I love her quote because every athlete, every person, all of us can and should become as mentally tough as possible.
Oh, that's great. Jim, so now we talked a little bit about what mental toughness truly is. Maybe you could share some insight on what mental toughness is not.
Well, in terms of what mental toughness is not, it's, you know, definitely not how it's often depicted in low budget sports movies, you know, with athletes gritting their teeth, risking an injury, sidelining their emotions, or, you know, really steeling themselves when a coach screams be tough at them right before the big game. And, you know, as we all know, it's also certainly not about getting psyched out, you know, when you go up against tough competition, complaining about officiating, or pressing the panic button in big moments. Champions don't have a panic button. And so we want to get rid of ours if we have one, through mental toughness training. And so again, mental toughness is more about the ability to not let anything ruin your moment. You always want to win the moment and be the best you can be from one moment to the next.
Great. Yeah, well said. And recently, Jim, you told me that arguably we need mental toughness more now than ever. Could you share a little bit about why that is?
Yeah, I'm sure if, we asked everyone to raise their hands, we were able to see everyone here joining us today, that, everyone would agree that all of us are dealing with increasingly distracted and stressful lives. And we all face stiffer and more global competition, whether you're an athlete or a coach, in any line of work, to be honest. And it's the same in every sport. It's getting harder and harder to make a team and stay on that team. And the same goes in individual sports in which you're racing the clock, as well as other runners, cyclists, rowers, or swimmers. And so having said that, there's still a gap in many athletes' approach. And it really has nothing to do with getting, bigger, stronger, or faster. Most athletes and coaches will in fact argue that 70, 80, or even 90% of sports performance is mental. However, then they will spend 100% of their time working on the physical qualities they need to excel. And so, unfortunately, the mental game is often left to chance and circumstance. And that's not a good game plan. And so that's what we're all about, is how can you get in the zone more often? But no matter what we do to get in the zone more often, we're not going to always have our A+ game. And that's when it's all about how mentally tough can you be. So the bottom line here is that the mental game is really the final frontier in sports, and it's certainly the best way for you and your team to achieve your lofty goals and to get a competitive advantage.
Oh, that is a really good point. Thank you, Jim. And having worked with some of the top athletes, coaches, and teams in the world, what are some situations in which they've asked you to help them be a bit mentally tougher?
So I could think of some specific athletes and situations over the past couple of years. Number one, I worked with a top combat sport athlete, and so his situation was that he lost in devastating fashion to the world champion in his weight class, and he had to bounce back. And we really worked hard on his mental prep for the rematch, and he went on to win the fight and to claim the belt, and he's defended it several times since then. But it was just a really powerful example of just, overcoming a mental block, like, man, I lost this guy pretty badly last time. How am I going to beat him this time? And, so he had to do a whole lot of believing in himself, and he had to really get in the best state of mind and emotion to win that fight, and he did. So that was, I thought, was a really incredible example of mental toughness in action. Another one is LPGA Tour player whose confidence took a big hit during her first year on tour. And that often happens. You're a superstar at one level, and then you move up to the next level, and you realize, you start having, some doubts and questions about how good am I really? And that happened for her. But she worked really hard on her mental toughness and was able to get her mojo back and perform the way she was capable, that she knew she was capable of performing during her sophomore season on tour, and then is off and running. So, great example of, we're all going to hit some walls, and but if we, get our head in the right place, we can bust through those walls. And, just one more quick example. I've worked with a lot of injured student athletes and injured professional athletes who wanted help with the psychological side of recovery from injury. And so one athlete I'm thinking in particular had suffered a Tommy John. He suffered an injury to his pitching arm, to his elbow, and needed Tommy John surgery. And he knew in advance that the recovery process was going to be as much, if not way more, about mental toughness than it was going to be about physical toughness. And so I was really proud of him and impressed with just how much he worked on his mental game during the recovery process, so that when he did, make it back to the field, he was ready to go. And so, there's so many circumstances that test us and, put us up against a wall. And, it's mental toughness that allows us to do what we need to do. So, kind of turning the tables on you, Phil, as a two-sport athlete, college athlete, how did you use mental toughness in your game in life?
Sure. I think, well, coming from England to a small college in Kansas City, I was, 4.5, 5,000 miles away from home and didn't know anybody. So that was definitely tricky, at least the first semester and a half. So really just having to grid out that time, and not only the dislocation of being far away from home, but going through one of the worst winters Kansas City has had on record, and dealing with those kind of extreme temperatures that I hadn't dealt with before, having come off probably the hottest summer they had had in 10 or 12 years. And so, yeah, there were just a lot of different components to that, and just growing pains in terms of being away from the family for the first time. So I think I also had to show commitment when the soccer and the basketball seasons overlapped a little bit. So we had interval training on the track for with the basketball team, and we had early and late two-a-days with the soccer team. And then once we got into the swing of the season, there were home and away games for both sports, and practices and weight room sessions for all of those, and just trying to show up and be fully present and fully committed, even on those days when mind and body were feeling that had taken its toll, really.
Yeah, that's a great example. It's, life is going to happen. And, even with our best laid plans, we're going to have to show what we're made of. And you had a lot on your plate and you were able to take care of business. So I think that's a great example of mental toughness with everything that was happening in your life.
Oh, thank you. And with that in mind, Jim, we've talked quite a lot before about the kind of the building blocks of mental toughness, so that you're not leaving the mental game to chance or circumstance, but actually have a plan, have some mental skills within the main mental skill of mental toughness that you can work on every day. And so let's talk a little bit more about what you call the 4 C's, and specifically the first one of those, which is confidence.
Yeah, in a previous webinar, we quoted Jack Nicklaus, and he said that confidence is the single most important factor in golf, and also probably in life, he said. And a lot of athletes, a lot of coaches would probably agree with that assessment, across all sports. And so what is confidence? And the way I explain it is, confidence is trusting your abilities deep down, and trust in yourself and your ability to handle every situation. And so just take a moment right now to imagine what everyone that's, listening right now, what you can accomplish if and when you believe in yourself to an absolutely unbelievable level. And, especially in situations when it matters most. And, the sky really is the limit in those situations where we trust ourselves completely and, we believe in ourselves to that unbelievable level. And if you're that confident, you can definitely shrink any slumps. You're more likely to find your flow. And then certainly you're going to thrive under pressure. So confidence is a big one. And that's something that, almost with every athlete I've ever worked with, that's something that we spend a lot of time on.
Fantastic. And what would be a good practical takeaway for building confidence?
Well, for a confidence tip that's, maybe a bit counterintuitive, and this is about, framing our situation, I think is really important, how we look at, what happens. So one recommendation is to actually get psyched up rather than psyched out when you see a competitor, or an opponent perform really well, or even break a world record. And, I've worked with athletes that have said, hey, during my event, it could be track and field, I'm thinking of, for example, someone broke a world record in the prelims, or at least, had a personal best, and, and they kind of came out of nowhere. And so, the pressure was really on me. And but what we tend to do in those situations is we feel threatened, we get a little jealous, we start feeling, diminished. Like, I don't know if I can do this. And, but in terms of confidence, you could say, look, they're just showing me what's possible, in my own game, in my own performance. And if they can do it, I can also do it. And so in this way, in terms of how you frame what happens, the success of others in your sport can actually be used as a confidence booster rather than something that is deflating or demoralizing. So next time you see someone do something really well, think, hey, man, I can do that too if I work hard and smart. So use others to really, it's almost like a model of excellence and confidence rather than something that is more threatening.
Absolutely. Great. And another challenge that athletes, coaches, and teams face quite often, Jim, is being able to focus. We know that, as you said earlier, we're living in an ever more distracted and fast-paced world with increased level of competition, and there's more and more coming at us all the time. And with that in mind, it can be hard for athletes to focus their best when it matters the most. So could you help us define concentration?
Yeah, unfortunately, most of us are, probably at 60, 70, 80% of our power because we're scattered. We're not focused. And concentration is the task at hand being handled. And it does require focused mental and physical effort on a task that ignores all distractions. And so your ultimate aim as an athlete, our ultimate aim in whatever we do, should be to focus on the right thing at the right time, every time. And just like confidence, we could really improve our concentration to get the most out of the abilities that we have.
Oh, well said. And what would be a handy takeaway tip for improving concentration?
I think for a simple and powerful exercise, I would recommend that everyone identifies a keyword or short phrase that helps them to refocus on their performance when they discover that their mind has wandered. Usually we time travel where our mind wanders back to the past or skips ahead to the future. And then other times we're just caught up in some external distraction, noises and, things and visually that take our attention away from the task at hand. So in those situations, some power phrases or key words that we can use that can really help us to refocus quickly include snap back, forget it and focus, be all here, or just even sometimes just shouting to yourself, focus. It's always about this play, this moment. And the key is to find a phrase, again, that works best for you. So, it's a discovery process, and you could start playing around with these, outside of your performance, whether in practice or in training sessions. But getting back to the snap back phrase, a lot of athletes sometimes will wear a rubber band, and I've done this with golfers where, depending on the golfer and their situation, they've really benefited from wearing a rubber band around their wrist. And, when their mind goes, a place it shouldn't be, like maybe skipping ahead too much and, to the end of the tournament and anticipating getting the trophy or, not breaking their, their score that they have in mind, they'll snap the rubber band just enough so it stings a little bit, and then they say snap back to themselves, and it's kind of like a way to reset. So having a refocus word or phrase is super powerful, and I think we should all have one of those in our back pocket for when it's needed.
Oh, absolutely. Jim, even if an athlete is focused and is concentrating on the moment at hand, when a game or maybe even the season is on the line, it can be hard to steady your nerves. So with this in mind, how would you define composure?
Composure to me is standing tall as the hurricane around you swirls. And it's the ability, like you just mentioned, to deal with intense adversity and pressure with emotional and physical calm. And so specifically, you're able to manage, performance anxiety, frustration on the field, and any disappointment, and stay composed under pressure like a champion. And that's what champions do in those biggest moments. A lot of times they're at their most relaxed, and we do everything better when we're relaxed. And it doesn't mean that you're not being athletic. It doesn't mean that, you're not intense, but it just means that there's no extra tension in your muscles, or, you're not uptight in your mind. And so, when we're loose, free, athletic in those situations, that's when we perform our best and we make good decisions. When we lose our composure, that's the time when, we look back on it and say, man, I really beat myself today. And that's not a good feeling. So composure is definitely something that, again, with just how stressful life can be, that we really want to make sure that we're in control.
For sure. And what might be a good takeaway for learning to stay more composed under pressure?
I think a good takeaway for learning to be more composed under pressure is to realize that most of the time when you are under pressure, it's because you've done a lot of really, really good things to get into that position. And, I'm thinking about making the playoffs or competing in the Olympics, or, just having, a final shot to win the game. So you don't want to shy away from it or allow things to speed up in an effort to get it over with, which is, for most of us, that's what we tend to do, is everything speeds up on us. And we want to get it over with and get out of there, rather than slowing everything down and breathing deeply and putting a big smile on our face. And so what I would say is embrace the pressure, enjoy the stress, love being uncomfortable, and you want to think to yourself, you know what, this is exactly where I want to be. I can do this. I will do this. And if you have that composure, then you're never truly defeated out there. You might not win the game, but your spirit wasn't broken, and you'll come back the next time and win it. So composure is one of those things, again, where just enjoying that pressure, that challenge, that opportunity, rather than thinking of it as a big scary threat, is half the battle.
Absolutely. And Jim, another challenge to mental toughness seems to be when a need for grit comes into play, but we don't really feel like being gritty. So maybe if an athlete wakes up, say a student athlete early in the semester, feeling good after a long sleep, the sun's shining, and maybe they started to go on a winning streak already, it's pretty easy to show up and put in our best effort. But we all know that life gets in the way, and quite often that is not the case, and maybe more often than not, and that feeling good is overrated. So maybe that same athlete on the next day wakes up not feeling great, maybe still sore from practice or weight training session. It's raining or sleeting or snowing, and they're struggling to find top form. And that's really when it can be tough to want to show up and grit it out. So how would you define commitment in a situation like that, when maybe an athlete isn't feeling their best?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because a lot of times we talk about motivation. I love motivation. Motivation is really nice, but champions lean on their commitment, and commitment is necessary. And because you're not going to always feel motivated, but you can always be committed. And that's what champions are all about, is they have both feet in whatever they're doing. And, they really are a 10 out of 10 on a commitment scale. And anything less than a 10 out of 10, you're giving yourself an out. And you don't want to give yourself an out if you have big goals and dreams. So commitment is applied energy now in the short term and extended over the long term. And it is the desire to continue a task, invest energy in a goal, and delay quick gratification for the ultimate benefit. And that's something that we all need to do, because, it's just human nature to want quick gratification, but champions are all about that ultimate benefit. And a commitment, I would also say, is a pledge. And when you commit to something, you are promising future results, whether that be to yourself, your coaches and teammates, and as well as to your sport. A quote that I really like in terms of commitment and excellence is from Vince Lombardi. And he said, the quality of a person's life is in direct proportion to their commitment to excellence, regardless of their chosen field or endeavor. So, if you really want a high quality life, and, as we would say it, gold medal life, it's all about commitment to excellence.
I love that. Great. And what might be a tip for staying committed throughout the season, particularly again on those days or maybe even during those weeks when you're either tired or worn down or for whatever reason just don't really feel like showing up on a particular day?
Yeah, there's so many important things in terms of maintaining that commitment, because again, life gets in the way, and our motivation takes a hit at times. And so obviously in the Champions Mind app, we talk a lot about some specific strategies. I would add one for today that find and we've all heard this, but or something similar, but I don't think most of us do this. And so I would definitely recommend it. And that is having a teammate or a partner or a goal buddy that you could check in with each day. And, let's say it is a teammate, the start of practice or, for a training session is you share with each other, what is your daily improvement goal for today? And some days you're just kind of scuffling along and you need your teammate to hold you responsible, to stay positive and be accountable to your goal. And that's so powerful, because sometimes we'll let ourselves down, but we're much less likely to let someone else down. So having that person that will hold us accountable, but then also holding them accountable, is a true win-win. So I definitely recommend that. Find someone to help you support your commitment, to see how great you can be as an athlete and as a person.
Oh, I love that. Great. Well, of course, Jim, we could talk about mental toughness all day from a theoretical standpoint, but in keeping with some of the great examples you just gave us, my mind kind of turns to those instances where our mental toughness and the 4Cs are going to be put to the test. So if an athlete or team's 4Cs aren't solid and they find themselves in a high pressure situation, what might be the result of that?
Yeah, I would say that the 4Cs are, in terms of building blocks, are one of the building blocks, and that would be under the mental component. And that would go along with the physical side, the tactical side, and the technical side of sport. And when pressure and stress get put on that stack of blocks, and one block gets pushed out of the stack, then everything collapses. And that is, teams end up underperforming and, even splitting apart and arguing with each other during those times where it matters most to perform well and be tough and tight together. So the key, though, is if these blocks can stay strong and tightly bound together, then nothing can move or topple the stack. And so again, usually it's the mental and emotional block in the stack of blocks that tends to let us down because we haven't trained it as well. And so under pressure, things fall apart. And if we can make that the strongest part of our game, then we're going to be tough to beat. We're not going to be able to be pushed over.
Definitely. When circumstances conspire to put us to the test and to, as you say, see whether those blocks in our foundation of mental toughness are aligned or out of place, what might be a good way to display our mental toughness and handle such pressure?
So the key is when opportunity arises, it's too late to prepare. So to my way of thinking, it's all about what you do in practice and what you do with your mental skills training on a daily basis before you get to the game or, are in those big moments. And the key here is it's really about taking your mental game up to the same level as your physical one. And champions, leave no stone unturned in their preparation. And so we can and all should prepare for the future now by working on our mindset today, regardless of our sport or career. Because again, when we get those opportunities, and they're going to come, might not always be when we want them to be, but when they do come, we better be ready, or it's kind of on us. And so with mental toughness, mental skills training, working on it a little bit each day, we're good to go in those moments. And that's the best feeling in the world.
Absolutely. And with that in mind, Jim, you recently told me a story of a well-known NFL running back who was able to kind of rise above his situation and put some of these tips, tools, and techniques that you've shared with us today into action. So, would you mind sharing that story with everybody?
Sure. And, I do have to say apologies in advance to any Seattle Seahawks fans, but I really I'm kind of going down memory lane here a little bit because it was a few years ago, but I really love the mental toughness displayed by a guy named Ryan Grant. He was a running back for the Green Bay Packers. And, the particular game I'm thinking about is in the 2007 NFC divisional playoff game against the Seattle Seahawks. And it was at snowy Lambeau Field. And, by the way, this player, Ryan Grant, if you're unfamiliar with him, he was undrafted out of Notre Dame and was only in his second year in the NFL. And so here he is in this big game. This is his opportunity. You don't get that many in the NFL, especially if you're an undrafted player like he was. And so here's what happened that day. On the first drive the Packers had in the game, Grant fumbled the ball and Seattle ended up scoring a touchdown. Well, it got worse because on the second drive, Grant fumbled again, and Seattle scored another touchdown. Now, at that point, after two fumbles, the other team scores two touchdowns, you're down 14-0 at home, in such a big game. Most of us would have probably gladly fallen into a black hole and wanted to disappear forever. But Grant was able to just demonstrate so much mental toughness that he bounced back from those two early fumbles to set a franchise playoff record of 201 yards rushing. And he ended up rushing for 3 touchdowns in the Packers come from behind victory. Now, what I really love about this and getting the window into his mindset is after the game, here's what he said. He told himself about those 2 early fumbles in the game. He said, it happened. That sucks. Got to move on. Real simple. And I really like it because he acknowledged it, he accepted it, and then he truly let it go. So he could focus on the next down, the next drive, the next series. And totally turned around the game and, has helped his team win the game. And another cool anecdote from that day is Brett Favre. He said that Brett Favre came up to him, and Brett Favre was more of a veteran at this point, and he came up to Grant on the sideline after that second fumble and said, to Grant, listen, if there's anybody who's screwed up in a game, it's been me. Let's get back in our groove and let's play our game. You'll be fine. And so, think about what a shot in the arm that was for Grant. Favre was being a great leader, a great teammate, and, showing his own mental toughness that, hey, we all screw up. It's really about what we do next. And, it's such a cool story because Grant went from really being in football hell at the start of the game to being in football heaven, at the end of the game. And that all took place in one afternoon. And it's a truly remarkable story of mental toughness and teamwork because, again, Ryan Grant wasn't a superstar. He was in his second year. This could have been a defining moment for his career in the bad way. He turned it around because of his attitude, his mental toughness, his mindset into becoming, the career-defining game in his career. And he ended up having a solid career and ended up winning the Super Bowl. So just a great story. So let me, Phil, let me turn the tables on you again. What's a mental toughness story from sports that you really like that you want to share with us today?
Oh, thank you, Jim. Well, it's tempting to go with the Michael Phelps story from the Olympics, where in one race, one side of his goggles started filling with water and then the other side did. And somehow he was able to not only keep going and finish that race, but to also win the gold medal, which is a great example of composure and grace under pressure. But being as you mentioned earlier, college basketball player, I think I'll go with an NBA example instead. And there was one game where going into it, Steph Curry had already not only been the NBA MVP, but the first unanimous MVP in league history. He'd already won a title with Golden State, but instead of being what some people consider him to be, which is the best shooter in league history. He actually, at halftime in that game, his box score at least would indicate that maybe he was one of the worst, as he had scored 0 points. You know, every layup he tried to flip up and in kind of skidded off the backboard at an odd angle. The referees kept their whistles in their pockets and weren't giving him foul calls on those kind of drives. And almost every one of his long shots that he's well known for either hit front rim, he just kind of seemed to have tired legs, or bounced off the rim as if he was more of a line drive shooter like Draymond Green. And so going into the locker room at halftime, the Warriors are down, and Curry uncharacteristically has 0 points. But somehow he comes out on fire and ends up with 45 and helps the Warriors clamber out of this hole and come and record a comeback win. And when he was interviewed afterwards, he restated the famous Larry Bird quote, which is, "The best shooters have the shortest memories." And remembering this at halftime, he went out and seemed to just really focus on his shooting form in the third and fourth quarters. His touch came back, and he was able to pour in all of his points in the last 2 quarters and end up with a points total that most of his teammates would take in any given game, let alone the half. So again, really just showing that, as Larry Bird alluded to, that when you encounter problems and adversity, as you inevitably will in games and practices and life, you need to just focus on, as you said earlier with golf, making your next shot the best shot and not focusing on what's gone before, but what's to come next.
Yeah, that's a great story, Phil, because, you know, again, it's the difference between our best performance and our worst performance is, you know, our mental performance. And again, that's where mental toughness comes into play. And in the 2 examples we just shared, what really hit me, I guess, just listening to you, is that, you know, I mentioned that Ryan Grant was an undrafted player out of Notre Dame. And as we all know, Steph Curry wasn't, you know, he went to a tiny college. He wasn't considered a top guy. I don't think anyone predicted he would even be an all-star ever. And then look where he is now in terms of being a world champion and, you know, a slam dunk Hall of Famer. And so, you know, it's just a great example of what we can accomplish when our mind is right.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Jim. And Lindsay, as Jim and I were talking there, I noticed that we had some questions coming in from the audience. I know we won't be able to get to all of them in the interest of time, but would you maybe be able to read the first one for Jim to answer?
Sure, Phil. We did receive all the questions, so again, keep entering those, and we'll be able to get back to you in those with the blog post. Yes, the question for Jim is, as an athlete, how can I act mentally tough when I'm not feeling that way?
Ooh, thanks, Lindsay. That's a great question, because most of the time, again, we're not going to have our A+ game. We're going to be mentally fatigued. We're going to be, you know, physically fatigued. We're going to be sore. We're going to be tired. And then we're going to have a lot of stuff going on in our life. And so that's when we do need to be mentally tough. And that's why, again, the importance of you know, this harkens back to the importance of daily mindset skills training, because mindset or mental toughness, it's not a button to be pushed. It's something that you need to work on and develop, just like our physical skills. And so if you work on your mental toughness a little bit each day, you work on your mental skills training a little bit each day. When those moments happen where you need to be at your best, you will be at your best. And then sometimes, you know, we've all heard the expression, you know, fake it till you make it. And, you know, I prefer face it till you make it, which is, you know, you keep putting yourself in position to win and to learn. And so if you do find yourself in a position where you're at 60%, make it your goal to say, hey, look, you know, positive self-talk, good body language, you know, what's the next best action, and then keep repeating that. And you want to be able to look back on whatever performance it was that day and say, you know what, I got the best out of whatever I had today. And so, you know, whether or not I was the champion, I am a champion because I couldn't have done anything better today than I did. So that's what mental toughness is fun, because when your head hits the pillow at night, and you can look back and go, man, today was a tough day, but I made the best out of today, that truly is a gold medal day. And, it only happens if we're mentally tough. So thanks so much for that question.
Thanks, Jim. In the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and pass this on over to Phil to wrap up.
Oh, thanks so much, Lindsay, and also to Jim for your expertise as always. And thanks to everyone also who joined us today. We know everyone's busy. I'm about to embark on being home parent again, as well as obviously working from home, as a lot of us are. So anyone in that situation, that things got crazy with COVID, and even for those without kids, we know it's a busy time. So thank you for carving out a little slice of today to spend with us. And really, we'd love to come alongside you and help make your mindset the strongest part of both your game and your life. That's really our mission, is for you to go for gold and never settle for silver every day. And if you're an athlete, you can do that and learn even more about mental toughness and some of the other mental skills that Jim mentioned, like visualization and self-talk, in the Champions Mind app, which you can download for either your Apple or Android phone. And if you already have the free version, you might want to consider upgrading, as the pro version has over 100 audios and we're adding more all the time. And if you're a coach, I can see we've got some coaches on the line today. We're offering a discounted rate on the team license for a limited time as well. And this includes access to all the pro sessions that I just mentioned, all the pro audios, as well as to an exclusive 12-module course on each of the main mental skills, which include mental toughness. And you can easily guide your team through these with a coach's dashboard, which enables you to manage your team's progress in just a couple of minutes a day. So if you're interested in that team license for your athletes, just shoot us an email to the address on the screen, and we'll go ahead and help you get set up. And really, again, our mission goes back to being here to serve you with world-class mental skills. And so just let us know if we can help in any other way, and stay tuned for news of further webinars on topics like the psychology of injury and thriving under pressure. And thanks again so much for your time. Jim, do you have any closing thoughts?
Thanks everyone for joining us today, as Phil mentioned, and Lindsay, and the three of us really appreciate the time that you did carve out of your day to join us. We had some quick hits on mental toughness, and hope it was gave you some ideas, and then gives you some things to think about. So I'm hoping everyone has a gold medal day. Have a great rest of your week, and looking forward to future events. So thanks so much. Let us know how we can be of help, and we'll talk soon. So thanks again. Bye.